Thank you. All right, it's almost 5 after 12. Welcome to this Apple Harvest Open Office Hour. I'm John Clements. As you can see, I'm out here in the UMass Orchard. I decided to try something different today. I was hoping for a cloudy day because it's hard for me to see my screen with the sun, but as you know, the weather forecast is rather unreliable. Behind me is I hope you can see the apples, a row of Ruby Mac Macintosh. Anybody who grows those knows they really color up red early. They look really nice. Um, However, they're still pretty green. I mean, I suspect they really won't be ready to pick at least for another week. So avoid harvesting those if you can. I don't see that any Macintosh are really ready to pick right now, although I don't have any Marshall Macs here at the UMass Orchard. They're one of the earliest Macintosh. So anyways, but I know economically ripe and ideally ripe are different topics. So I am recording, I'm recording this initial, I'm gonna give you a short slide presentation and then we can open it up for questions. I'll stop recording, try to anyways, at that point. But I'm also, I didn't realize that Zoom allows you to go Facebook Live. So presumably I'm Facebook Live. I don't know how that's going because I can't keep track of multiple things, but it'll be interesting to see if that draws in some other people and there's any comments. So with that, you can always use the chat. I've got the chat open if something really you want to ask a question during my presentation. I'm going to try and start that now by sharing my screen. And try this one. We're going to go to present. All right, weather forecast. Like I said, you know what the weather forecast is, so I won't continue on with that one. Now, if I use the arrow key. Okay, looking at the 6 to 10 day outlook for September 6th through 10th. That's a coincidence. The better part of the middle of the country is supposed to be a good chance of being colder than average, but here in New England, especially Eastern Mass, it's a good chance or a better chance of being warmer than average. So this is starting next Sunday. And then precipitation wise, naturally, when apple harvest is started, it's going to start raining. Above average chance of above average normal precip. But I wouldn't hang my hat on that. You know, the weather forecast this time of the year is so up in the air, you never know what's going to happen. Anyways, but just, you know, something to keep in mind. And if that's what happens next week, could make harvest a little challenging. I wanted to mention NAA a little bit because we're coming up to the time where people would be using NAA for stop drop. Frutone L is probably the formulation that most people have and would be using. However, you can also get Pomaxa in a product called Refine from Fine Chemical. Keep in mind that NAA is a very short-term stop drop solution. If the apples are starting to drop and you need to do something, it's a good intermediary measure to apply NAA, get some short-term drop control. What it does is it prevents the abscission layer from forming, so it prevents fruit abscission. However, it generally advances ripening at the same time. It advances maturity. So once that abscission layer starts to let go and the NAA wears off, the apples will be advanced in maturity and will really start to fall off. So if you use NAA, use it as, okay, I'm going to put it on, but I need to get these apples picked over the next 7 to 10 days. You can't wait weeks like you can with Retain. We generally bandy about a rate of 10 to 20 parts per million, which is always per 100 gallons dilute tree row volume, right? That's equivalent to 4 to 8 ounces, fluid ounces of NAA per 100 gallons. Interestingly, the label says 8 to 32 ounces are typical. 8 ounce would be 20 parts per million. Now, you know, you can use somewhere between 10 and 20 depending on what your objective is. If you really need to get some short-term, really good drop control, you might want to use that 8-ounce rate. However, probably the 4-ounce rate, even with 2 applications, is generally more appropriate. I mean, 8 ounces can get you in trouble because it can really advance ripening. I'm sure Dwayne is chomping at the bit to say something, but I'm not going to let him. Timing, I already mentioned, when the first apples start to drop, no sooner, no later. It's a little bit of, you know, chicken, playing chicken. You don't want to put it on too soon because you'll advance ripening and not get the drop control you need at the point you need. If you wait too long and drop is really getting going, then, you know, it can be problematic in that regard too. So, you know, there's a technique where they tell you to tap the branches, and if you see a few apples drop, it's time to put the NAA on. I'm guessing we're going to start to see some drop moving in pretty soon here. You can use NAA with retain. You know, you probably would use the 4-ounce, 10 parts per million rate, often with a half rate of retain or even a full rate. That kind of can give you the ultimate and stop drop control. Retain will help delay the ripening, and you'll get the benefit, the added benefit of the NAA keeping the fruit from falling off. So that's kind of a information. Usually, the way I look at using those two is you kind of want to do modest rates of both. It's kind of like mixing 2 fungicides. You don't usually use or insecticides. You don't usually use the full rate of both, but you use a reduced rate. And in terms of storage, NAA treated apples really should go into short-term storage, not long-term storage. So you can ask questions about that at the end. I'm going to keep going because I'm recording this and want to get a good recording without a lot of interference. All right, maturity report. I'm going to go through this pretty quick. Macs aren't ready, period. I mean, the starch index on these Snappy Macs was 3 to 5s. The Brix was only 11. The colors there. Macs don't, the DA meters doesn't work on them, so I don't even bother. I just don't think they're going to be ready for another week. Same with Linda Mac, still very green. Starch index of 2 to 4. Brix was only 10.5. You know, I like to see that Brix up there around 12. Gala, Buckeye Gala, despite being nice and red and good looking, they're really not ready either, although the DA was down. And I did note some background color change to yellow. They're close. I'd almost say that they could be spot picked on color later this week. I'd give them a little more time. I just felt that they were a little green still. Honeycrisp, this one kind of surprised me. These are regular Honeycrisp. Of course, I picked the red ones. They're large. The color was 50 to 75%. The DA was 0.59, usually at about 0.60. I feel good about picking them. Brix was 14 and the starch index was 4 to 6. Like I said, they were farther along than I thought. I would watch Honeycrisp really closely, and as soon as you get some color, I thought the flavor was good. Here's what the starch pattern looked like. To me, that's a Honeycrisp ready to pick. Now, they may not all be ready to pick, and if you have retain on your Honeycrisp, they're not going to be ready to pick. But at least here, and I'm not saying it's everywhere, our Honeycrisp could be probably spot picked mid to late this week. So you'd have them for Labor Day weekend, which is late this year. Ginger Gold are finally ready to pick. I know probably most people are picking those, so I won't talk too much about that. You know, I always say Ginger Gold is a Labor Day apple. Today could be Labor Day. Would be the earliest Labor Day, but we have the latest Labor Day next Monday. But it could be Labor Day. So Ginger Gold's ready to go. The Connie, Dwayne, the starch index is up to 6 to 8. So they're not all 8, but that one's getting really close. The Brix was right up there. I think certainly if you had a farmer's market and wanted to get some of those Connies picked, you could certainly do that. They should be good for another week or so. Silken, I don't know how many of you have Silken. I thought maybe it would be closer to being ready, but as I was picking them, they still look kind of green. They were kind of green. Again, I kind of think Silken is typically the second week in September, so I'd give those another week to get some nice yellow color. And then I mentioned the MAIA SM, Sweet Maya, I like to call it. They're still hanging on the trees nicely. I think they've moved along to a point where if I was growing these, I'd certainly be picking them this week, definitely. I heard that maybe if you go another week or so, you might start to get some off flavor. So not that you have them, but this one is something to keep an eye on. You may want to consider getting some orders in there because I think it's a really good sweet flavored early apple that people will like. Great color, great appearance, very attractive. Should fly off the shelves. I think that's it. Yes, for those. So let me hold my windscreen and my sunscreen up here. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I was recording. I am going to stop the recording, folks, because I don't really want to put all the comments on the recording. I don't know. Maybe I'll let it go for a little longer. But what I do want to do is I'm going to try and unmute you all now. And we can open it up to discussing my slides or whatever you want to talk about. Can somebody check their sound now to see that they can say something good.
Good.
Say something important.
Say something good.
I'm not on drugs today. I can vouch for that. I will tell you that. I really not. It's too early. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Anybody? Dwayne?
I'm here.
Anything? Well, I hear you. You want to say anything about NAA? You've worked more with it than I have.
Which one?
NAA.
NAA. Well, I would like some comment. The retain NAA combination. You have it the ultimate. The work that I did for probably 5 years, it didn't work all of the time. So you can't depend upon it. And physiologically, I have a hard time understanding how NAA going on 3 weeks before normal harvest is still doing much. And I've also noticed if you're tardy in harvesting those fruit, when you put them in storage, sometimes you have a relatively small percentage of those that really soften. And you correctly said, I believe, that you don't want to put them in storage very much. But retain does not reverse that cracking and splitting of caused by NAA. And so, you know, there's another drop control compound that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is Harvista. Now, Harvista, you put that on, and within 3 days, you've got drop control. And so, I know it's an expensive compound, but it will catch on pretty fast, and not everyone is going to use it. But that is a possibility that should be in the conversation early on. Another thing I would mention is if it starts to fruit starts to drop, even though they're, you know, say you have 10% drop, it will in a relatively short time control that drop. So that's another one that should be in the conversation, although NAA is certainly the one that's convenient and a heck of a lot cheaper to use.
I lost your train of thought. Harvista, you said.
Harvista.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't. It's kind of Harvista's off my radar screen. I know. I don't think too many people in Massachusetts are using it, but definitely it's out there. It's available as far as I know.
Well,
How long would you expect it to hold, Dwayne?
I would. I haven't gotten the new formulation and the new way they put it on. They're doing all that internally, but I figured about 3 weeks is what you can expect, and not much more. And then when it lets go, it really lets go. That's been my experience. Within, say, 2 or 3 days, you can have 25% in the ground.
I mean, one of the advantages of Harvista is you can wait for the fruit to really color up and then apply it. You know, get to that point where it's just about ready to pick. Apply Harvista, it'll stop them for 2 to 3 weeks and give you plenty of time to pick them.
Another advantage is that the 3-day pre-harvest interval, so that gives you a lot more flexibility than retain. When retain really isn't in the conversation now because it takes 7 to, well, probably I consider it to be 10 days before it really clicks in as far as drop control is concerned.
I'm not detecting yet. things coming off here. The Macs were pretty firm on the trees. Kind of curious, anybody, and I may not want to admit it, but doesn't seem like we're seeing much early drop. A lot of apples came off the trees here with the wind we had. So maybe those are the apples anyways. We would have seen a little bit of push off and early drop, but knock on wood, I'm not seeing it yet. Being the fatalist I am, I always like, oh my God, they're all gonna drop off, but not yet.
Are you taking credit for that, John?
No,
Oh, okay.
not taking credit at all. I do like the improvement. I do like the improvement in weather we're having. That's a big plus. You know, I'm sure we'll have a week of hot weather in the middle of September again, though. Come on, people, what's happening? Anything good, bad?
John, I'll interject if you have a moment.
Yep.
First, some information, and then maybe a question. Andy's been doing quite a bit of work with the Harvista in the Hudson Valley with starch testing and helping those guys time those treatments a little better than they have in the past. And his feeling was that down there, they're anywhere from 4 to 6 days ahead of last year.
Huh.
I'm not sure I'm seeing that here. Is anybody else feeling that we're that far ahead, or is this a normal season, or what's the consensus?
Well, I'll say my 2 cents, of course. I think that up until now, or at this point, it's fairly average. I'm thinking, though, that things are really going to pick up really fast. That's just the way I'm looking at it now, Glenn. Why I think they're going to pick up really fast, I think, you know, with the change in weather, the cooler nights, I just think that's going to kick them in and they're going to just start to mature quickly. But I always think that it doesn't happen.
Well, I think it's a good sign that we've had a little more regular precipitation in the last week or 10 days. And I don't know if it's folklore or truth, but people tend to think that that tightens the apples up a little bit after you've come out of a hot, dry spell. So maybe that will counteract.
You would think hydrating the trees would help, yes. Anybody else?
I think we're average. I don't believe we're ahead of average.
Yep.
If we get the cold weather, we'll get color, but I don't really know that will necessarily ripen them, will it?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I want to say that, you know, you would think it would help preserve them and keep them longer, but there's also probably some signaling going on in the tree. So
Could be.
yeah, I don't know. You know, every year I just shake my head and say, I don't know what's going on. Hey, quickly, Glenn, what varieties are they using Harvista on in the Hudson Valley? Mostly.
I confess I'm not
Okay.
entirely up to speed on that. I only check in with Andy occasionally, but my sense is that Gala's, Honeycrisp are probably getting the lion's share, and then there are some Macintosh, but I think overall the feeling is that like Retain and like Smart Fresh, it works the least best on Macintosh and better on other varieties.
I mean, I think Retain is a pretty good tool on Macintosh, if you want my honest opinion.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I probably shouldn't generalize that wide,
Yeah.
but
No,
it works.
you were talking about Harvista. Yeah.
Yeah, it works better on other varieties, and they have a little bit better understanding, if that's the right word, of the timing. It's taken 3, 4, 5 years of starch testing and manipulating those timings to get a better handle on it from when they started.
Well, you know, like I said, I tested apples this week, but I was kind of suspecting there wasn't much going on. But next Monday, I think will be a different story. So we'll see how that goes.